In November 1095, Pope Urban II issued a famous call to arms at the Council of Clermont in France, urging Christians to launch a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem and other sacred lands from Muslim control. In the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks, originally nomadic tribes from Central Asia, had emerged as a powerful new force within the Islamic world. After converting to Islam and achieving a series of military victories, they established dominance in the Middle East, expanding westward to capture Baghdad in 1055 and seizing large swaths of the Byzantine Empire following their triumph at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. Faced with this Seljuk threat, Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos was compelled to appeal to the West for assistance. Europe responded to this plea with fervor, amassing one of the largest armies of the era, 70,000 strong and comprised of knights and soldiers from across the continent. This First Crusade was led by some of the most influential French nobles of the time, including Adhemar of Le Puy and Raymond IV, Count of Toulouse, many of whom abandoned their holdings to join the cause. The armies converged on Constantinople, but arrived with meager provisions, anticipating aid and leadership from Alexios. The emperor, however, was principally interested in rapidly transporting the Crusaders into Asia Minor. In exchange for supplies, he demanded that the leaders swear fealty and vow to restore any recovered lands to the Byzantine Empire. After securing these oaths, Alexios oversaw the Crusaders' crossing of the Bosporus in early 1097, offering counsel on confronting the Seljuk forces they would soon encounter. The Crusaders' initial objective was Nicaea, formerly under Byzantine control, but now serving as the Seljuk capital. The city came under siege on May 14, 1097, and Kilij Arslan, the Seljuk Sultan, hastily gathered an army to break the encirclement. On May 16th, Arslan's forces clashed with the unexpectedly large Crusader army. Suffering heavy casualties on both sides before being repulsed. The siege persisted until June 18th, when the Turkish garrison finally capitulated. The Crusaders then advanced through Anatolia in two contingents, one led by the Normans and the other by the French, still nurturing hopes that Alexios would dispatch a full Byzantine force to reinforce them. On July 1st, prior to the planned reunion at Dorylaeum, Kilij Arslan ambushed the Norman vanguard with an army of horse archers. The Normans quickly adopted a compact defensive formation around their baggage train and non-combatants, urgently summoning aid from the trailing French. Arslan's mounted archers soon encircled the Norman position, unleashing a barrage of harassing fire. But the French arrived with alacrity, prompting the Turks, who had anticipated crushing the isolated Normans, to retreat in the face of the unified Crusader army. The Crusaders proceeded through Anatolia unopposed, but the scorched earth left by the withdrawing Turks rendered the midsummer march grueling, with scarce food and water, leading to numerous losses among the men and horses. Desperate foraging and plundering became commonplace when the opportunity arose. Leadership remained contested, as no single commander wielded sufficient authority to assume overall command. The Crusaders' next target was the formidable city of Antioch, an essential waypoint between Constantinople and Jerusalem, ringed by substantial fortifications that discouraged any thought of direct assault. On October 20th, 1097, the Crusaders resigned themselves to a protracted siege. The city's sprawling size exceeded the Crusaders' capacity to fully invest it, enabling a trickle of supplies to reach the defenders. By January, the attritional 8-month siege had inflicted hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths from starvation among the Crusaders. Relief came in March, with the arrival of a modest English fleet, bearing supplies and reinvigorated foraging, alleviating the Crusaders' plight. Meanwhile, Kerbogha, an ambitious Seljuk commander, assembled a diverse coalition from southern Syria, northern Iraq, and Anatolia, aspiring to extend his dominion from Syria to the Mediterranean. Bohemond of Taranto, a prominent Crusader leader, warned his peers that Antioch's fall would leave the city in his sole possession. He revealed that an Armenian defender had agreed to admit the Crusaders through his segment of the walls. On June 2nd, this Armenian, Firuz, worked with Bohemond to infiltrate a select force, which then opened the gates to the Crusader army. Alerted by blaring horns, Antioch's Christian majority unbarred the remaining gates, allowing the Crusaders to storm the city. In the ensuing carnage, most of the Muslim inhabitants were slain, along with many Christian Greeks, Syrians, and Armenians caught in the tumult. Kerbogha's 40,000-strong vanguard reached Antioch a mere month later, enveloping the Franks. From June 10th onward, waves of Muslim soldiers battered the city's ramparts from sunrise to sunset, yielding few gains over the course of 4 days. Kerbogha then shifted to a strategy of starving out the Crusaders, whose morale plummeted as defeat loomed. The Franks unsuccessfully sued for terms of surrender. On June 28, 1098, the Crusaders sallied forth at dawn in 4 battle groups, catching the Muslim army off guard. The Muslims' discipline crumbled, and they mounted a disordered attack. Facing minimal losses, the Franks prevailed as the Muslim forces fractured and fled. Following this victory, Bohemond asserted his claim over Antioch, but failed to secure universal recognition. The resulting dispute delayed the crusade for the remainder of the year as the nobles quarreled, even as a plague decimated their ranks. With their already diminished cavalry and truculent Muslim peasantry withholding provisions, the restive minor knights and foot soldiers threatened to march on Jerusalem without their divided leaders. At last, in early 1099, the crusade resumed its progress, leaving a defiant Bohemond as the newly minted Prince of Antioch. Tracing the Mediterranean coast, the Crusaders met scant resistance, as local rulers favored truce and supplied the advancing army to avoid conflict. The Crusader force swelled as Robert of Normandy and Tancred joined as vassals. On February 14th, 1099, they began the siege of Arca, a fortified city in northern Lebanon. The siege dragged on, exacerbating tensions among the Crusader commanders in the absence of a unified leader, spurring internecine power struggles. The siege was ultimately abandoned on May 13th, with Arca's defenses intact. In Jerusalem, the Fatimids had ousted the Seljuks and moved to negotiate with the Crusaders, offering uninhibited access to pilgrims in exchange for the Crusaders halting their advance into Fatimid territories. The Crusaders rebuffed this overture. Iftikhar al-Dawla, Jerusalem's Fatimid governor, recognized the Crusaders' intent and expelled the city's Christian populace. By June 7th, the Crusaders reached Jerusalem, their numbers winnowed to a mere 12,000 men, including just 1,500 cavalry. The ravaged countryside, bereft of water and food, offered no prospect of sustenance. The Crusaders, lacking the manpower, provender, and time to replicate the protracted siege of Antioch, instead resolved to carry the city by storm. Godfrey of Bouillon and Tancred pitched camp to the city's north, while Raymond of Toulouse occupied the southern approach. The initial assault commenced on June 13th, but many Crusaders abstained due to internecine divisions among the leadership. The attackers managed to plant scaling ladders and contest the ramparts, but were ultimately driven back with heavy losses, prompting a council among the Crusader lords to plan a more unified subsequent assault. On June 17th, a Genoese fleet under Guglielmo Embriaco arrived, providing the Crusaders with skilled engineers and critically needed timber for siege engines. Soon after, intelligence arrived indicating that a Fatimid relief force was en route from Egypt, instilling a profound sense of urgency to marshal another attack. The final assault on Jerusalem was promptly launched, with Raymond's contingent battering the southern gate, while the remaining Crusaders pressured the northern wall. In the north, the Crusaders swiftly scaled the fortifications, seizing the parapets. The unexpectedly rapid incursion triggered a panic among the defenders, who abandoned their posts and opened the city to the attackers. As the northern defenses collapsed, Iftikhar al-Dawla rallied his garrison atop the Temple Mount for a final stand, but they were overwhelmed by Tancred's relentless assault. With the city's defenses crumbling, the Crusaders poured in, massacring the populace. Raymond and his soldiers advanced into the city, and Iftikhar, seeing the hopelessness of his position, negotiated safe passage to Ascalon in exchange for surrendering the citadel. Throughout the day, the indiscriminate slaughter continued, with Muslims put to the sword and Jews seeking sanctuary in their synagogue perishing as it was put to the torch. Jerusalem had fallen to the Crusaders. On July 22nd, the victorious Crusaders convened in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to establish a governing structure for Jerusalem. Godfrey of Bouillon was elected as the realm's secular leader, adopting the title Advocatus Sancti Sepulchri, Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. With their pilgrimage complete, the bulk of the Crusaders set out for home. Leaving a mere 300 knights and 2,000 infantry to hold the city. Many who had returned to Europe prior to reaching Jerusalem, and others who had forgone the expedition entirely, found themselves targets of familial contempt and papal threats of excommunication, once word of the Crusades' success had spread. The fortunate few who survived the trials of the campaign and knelt in the Holy City were feted as heroes upon their repatriation. The First Crusade, in securing Christian rule over Jerusalem, had an indelible impact on medieval Europe and the Near East, marking the inception of a centuries-long struggle to preserve and extend Latin Christendom's reach in the Holy Land and across the Mediterranean. The crusading movement left an enduring imprint on the European identity, fortifying the ideal of a united Christendom and further polarizing the relationship between the Christian and Islamic worlds.